Okay, so welcome back to the ones who
are not having coffee
who
yet.
are actually back. It's nice to see you enjoy the networking time, the mingling, that you are following our rules to speak with each other. Maybe you are like
To stick to the rules.
speaking too much with each other, but that's fine. If you miss the tours, you're going to have another chance to repeat them at lunchtime. So don't worry. We ask you again to please come back to your seats so we can stick to time. And welcome our next speakers.
Yeah, sit comfortable in your chairs because we have 1 hour and a half of presentations by Roland Fadrany from the Gaia-X Chief Operations Officer and Pierre, Gronlier, Gaia-X Chief Technology Officer. Please welcome them on stage.
Welcome, everyone.
Welcome.
I will leave the floor to Roland to start and take over later.
Yeah. So we're going to take you on a journey today about where we stand, what you can actually use today. But before we do that, we would like to invite you to scan that QR code during the presentation because it's quite long. We will be interactive. So we will ask questions that you please answer, and we show the answers on the screen. It's also the same tool we're going to use for the Q&A session. So please make sure you use what we have prepared here. Now, talking about Gaia-X, we would like to start with benefits for users and benefits for providers. So we want to build and implement common rules in order to be able to exchange data in a trusted way. We want to accelerate sovereign data-driven ecosystems, and we will show you how. And we want to enable global data-driven value chains through federated trust and interoperability. And it's important because you had that scheme in the morning when Ulrich presented and Catherine presented. We were talking about global, and we are already international because we are Europe, but global is really where we need to go next. For the providers, that opens a very interesting space because you expand your reach, visibility, and market share by delivering services which are certified as Gaia compliant. And you will see in that session that that certification process is not a theory, is not a document. We have created notes for certification and compliance, which are called Gaia-X Digital Clearing Houses. And Oliver Ganser in the morning session said, I, as a COO, I'm responsible now to make sure we run those nodes. Well, I have smartly outsourced that to our providers and the clearinghouse providers because Gaia-X will not host any of this code in production. This is really an opportunity for the providers. The providers can become a one-stop shop as clearinghouse providers for existing and new customers for the Gaia-X ecosystem. And eventually, you can see it's going to evolve to a data space as a service, and that will be really accelerating the adoption of market space, of data spaces, because you're not building the entire stack. You're just using stacks and just using data directly. Now, what you will see in this session is first user experience, how to get started. We take you step by step as a user through the point where you get a Gaia-X compliant service. Then we talk about catalogs, and I think it's maybe something that is surprising even for this audience that there is not one catalog, but there is many catalogs. Those are federated catalogs. Those federated catalogs can talk to each other, and we can create an ecosystem by catalogs. So this will be also very interesting. That's why we said it's a small and medium enterprise game changer. Easily advertise your services through federated catalogs. And finally, accelerate your business with supervised and automated contract negotiations. That's a view into the next step and next future, what we're doing, a glimpse where we're going with the next step of technology. Now, the first question already, these are the answers. So most of us are members. Many are hub members, and I'm warmly welcome the 70% future members especially. So For those of you who remember Paris, we had this little scenario where we had Dufour Storage as a classical provider. We had Montblanc as a company who was planting IoT devices. They are really professionals in IoT services and sensor technology, and those two decide to work together. And they use the digital clearing house for data exchange. And then with that, they create new combined services. They come in a joint common catalog. And then the services are available for other data spaces, such as environmental, tourism, mobility. So that was our scenario we demonstrated last year. Unfortunately, in many cases, the data is now owned by the same guys who have the technology. And so we have enhanced that model a little bit for this year. And we still have Dufour because we like them. We still have Montblanc because we like them. But the data no longer comes solely from Montblanc. The data comes from, let's say, areas where IoT devices and sensors are planted, where other companies add data to it. And that could be farmers. And then we have a special friend of Pierre, that's a farmer called Bob. He will talk more about Bob. And then we have OEMs like John Deere or any of the companies that are related to farming. And then we may have other data like weather data. And then we have River Trail, which is a company that aggregates data, develops climate research and weather prediction models that are in return creating value. Now you can see we have a bit more players than we had in the original scenario. And because we had Sébastien on stage this morning, when you think about it, it's pretty similar to Montblanc might be Agdata Hub, and Orange might be Dufour Storage. And you can see those scenarios are not as theoretical as they may seem in the first place. And with that, Pierre?
Thank you very much. Before we jump to the presentation, I would like to thank everyone to be here today. That's my third Gaia-X Summit, and I must say that this is the best one because this time we don't have to write anything ourselves. Basically, the presentation is a narrative where we demonstrate what our members have built. And I think this is already a game changer. So this is not much what we have created, but how it was used. And we are going to show what our members have created. Yes, exactly. So about Bob the farmer, to explain a bit the narrative, we will keep this narrative along the entire hour. So we have someone who has data. That person doesn't know necessarily exactly how to provide, how to expose the data. So that's why they are using consulting services firm. That's in the case Montblanc. And Montblanc then is exposing data to the outside world. And then you have already the first thing. You have a data producer, a data licensee, a data provider, and so on. So by having this scenario, which is slightly more advanced and complex than the previous one, we hope that you can identify yourselves to one of the actors. Then we have Montblanc. Montblanc, as a consulting company, doesn't have their own data center. They will call for another cloud service provider, here, Dufour, who will provide cloud storage services. And this data has value if this is used. So that's where Alice comes into the picture. And Alice is looking for data about farming. So they are looking for Bob's data. And now you see that, in fact, the three together are working in this ecosystem of Dufour, cloud storage, Montblanc, the farmer, the data, Alice, with some rights and rules. And we have this scenario. You will see this slide, I think, maybe 10 times today. But this is important because we will explore one area. And if you get lost during the narrative, every time you see these slides, it's like a reset to, OK, now we can jump and explore another path. The first thing you might say is that, OK, that scenario is too easy. My chains are more complicated. I'm a global supplier. I need to compute the carbon footprint with parts coming from the other side of the world. They are shipped in Europe, manufactured in Europe or assembled in Europe and then sold somewhere else. Well, that's the thing. This schema is simple, but you can nest it. So when I was talking about Bob having data, OK, that's cute. But in fact, Bob is probably working with other agricultures. The data, you don't have like one zip file. You have data from different sensors. You need to aggregate them. You have algorithms to clean, to generate data, to versionalize it. Montblanc, if this is a device IoT device management platform, then they are working also with IoT device manufacturer. So you can take the same scenario, three things that we had before, in fact, zoom indefinitely to find more complex things. So we abstracted that with a simple one. So back to the scenario we had, the same thing, second time. Now if we zoom out, so we were zooming in, if we zoom out, Dufour, that's just not the only CSP. You have a collection of CSP. We have, for example, StructureX, which has a booth here, which is a set of different CSPs, cloud service providers. Alice, the marketing research analyst, she's not working alone. Could be part of a wider group of market analysts. And Montblanc, again, you don't have one farmer. That could be Ag Data Hub with thousands of different farmers. So I would like to remind this picture and answer the question, how many data space do you count on that picture? So you can use the phone, I hope it works, and give us an idea of here. If you had to give a guess, I remind that you have these bubbles of different analysts, farmers, part of an agriculture, then the CSPs. It keeps changing, okay? But I think that we have a trend now. That's interesting. That's very interesting, and I like the answer a lot. I like the answer a lot. OK, the trend seems to be confirming itself, yes. OK, about half an infinity of data spaces. Good. I think that's good for the next part, so perfect. The scenario. When we want to have data spaces, then we ask ourselves, how do we describe the services? We talk about the data. Where is my data located? Who has access to it? Where are the backups? When I'm buying a cloud service offering, do they provide also business continuity, disaster recovery options for my data? If this is backup, where are they stored? If this is just replicated because you want to have resiliency, where are the replicas? So do you have information about the cloud service itself? Then market analysts, they have the right to take the data to process for analysts on the market. Do they have the right to use the same data for advertising? You can ask yourself that question. How much does it cost to move the data out of Dufour, to move my data out to another CSP? Do I have this interoperability or this capacity to move my data from one place to another, to move my workload from one place to another? All those questions that you ask yourselves, basically you ask for more transparency. And that's what we provide with the clearing house. So the clearing house is Gaia-X Digital Clearing House, the GXDCH. I think that's not easy to pronounce, but Gaia-X Digital Clearing House. And what we have with this clearing house, that's a few services that were already mentioned a bit before in the Ag Data presentation this morning. We have different versioning. So we have the version Tagus, which is now the version 1, up and running, live, with APIs. So 2 years, first year, second summit, we were talking about the Gaia-X framework. It was a bit abstract. What will Gaia-X provide? OK, we have a framework. We'll provide specification, code, and labels. Well, we have specification. We have HTML files, PDF that you can read. You can send that to developers. The developers can use them. We have source code, so artifact that I can use. Open source code, by the way. Everything is under either Apache or Eclipse licenses. And you have Swagger, so it's also documented. You have tutorials, you have guides, and connect to those APIs and live services. And then we have the labels. We also are a bit more mature in our approach to the market. So now you see that we have release names, versioning. So Tagus is the version 1, it's up there, based on the specification 2210. And then we have Loire, which will be the next version. And we have Danube even later that we start to work on. If you want to know more about that slide, I'm not going to explain what are the different services going to do. We have a tech theater, I think that side. I will be there later, and we will have a deep dive on exactly what are in the clearing house. And the clearing house, as it was hinted by Roland, we don't provide that ourselves. We have partners that operate the clearing house. So we really create an ecosystem of clearing house providers. So now you realize that the source code is open, specifications are freely available, and the services are run by different partners. So it's not really one of the key factors that we wanted to avoid with Gaia-X when it was created a few years ago, to avoid this locking effect or this gravity effect around one or two key players. And this is exactly what we have managed to achieve here. We have a long list on, I really insist on it, non-exhaustive list of candidates, clearinghouse under evaluation, and a list of accredited clearinghouse. And with that, we will start by the first presentation of how you can create your credentials, how it works. I know this is going to be a bit technical, but if you lost track, don't remember there will be another slide, and you will be able to connect yourself back to the storyline in a few minutes. When I said that we ask ourselves those questions, and I said that it's mostly about transparency, the clearinghouse here with Gaia-X credentials, that's how you declare those information. So while we provide API, we also wrote a small UI that helps you with a wizard, so with a rig, what you see is what you get, declare your legal entity. So it's a high-speed recording. Here, for example, you declare, using a wizard, what is your legal entity. So we go, you have your business registration number, you create your token, and you will be able to sign it. It will be also verified. You can sign then the Gaia-X terms and conditions. You can declare your service offering. Everything that you see on the screen now, in fact, it's not relevant for me to explain everything which is on the screen. The point is to show you that Tagus version 1 is out there. We have tools that helps you to onboard. And everything that we do here on the screen, this is also something that is available through API, and we will use the API in a workshop in the text theater in about an hour. So if you want to know how you can integrate that and automate the integration of those APIs in your tools, then please join the text theater. You see that, OK, it's a JSON file, it's a bit of text, weird. But that's also one of the key elements of Gaia-X. We don't have any lock-in around that, meaning that the credentials that you create here, those are yours. You might remember one of the pictures we had with Gaia-X, and the user is a centric part of at the center of the picture. That's exactly what you have. Once you have declared all your services, the wizard will enable you to verify that you are using the proper keys and send that directly to the compliance. So call compliance. The compliance will tell you, OK, I need to have a credentials about participants, terms and conditions, legal registration number. You can also send credentials about your service offering description. You can verify the information that you submit. Call the compliance API. Call the compliance API of any of the accredited clearinghouse. You don't have to stick to one. It's one of the things that I will show in the workshop. During the workshop, I will start with one clearinghouse, switch to another one, so to show you that I can combine credentials from different instances. And I think this is the beginning of interoperability. We don't have one instances that you need to use from beginning to end. And then your credentials are, I think it's looping, then send for the catalogs. Again, if you found that interesting, thank you very much. The presentation will continue, it's not stop. But I would like to highlight again, version 1 Tagus, it's out there. We have member, and we have, in the next few minutes, a presentation of several catalogs that are using those APIs. And if you want to know more, then go to the text theater. The right one.
It's really important. We had a nice example that Pierre went over real quick. We had Tagus out there, and we had specifications. And now we have a real release, which is GA, general available, which is Tagus. And then Pierre told me they actually make the last service that is so important, the CES service, where we talk about later. We get that ready before the summit. And I said, well, that is cool from an engineering perspective, but it's probably less cool from an operational perspective, because we promised we have stable releases. And I think we need to get into that into that mode now. So Tagus has all the code and has all the mandatory components we promised. And we added the CES service as an optional component. But I can tell you right now, in Loire, it's going to be mandatory. And we had a lot of discussion with mandatory components and about mandatory components with clearinghouse providers. When you think about mandatory components, we try to have a very light footprint on compliance as Gaia, because that helps in many ways. But there is two reasons why you need to have mandatory components. One is when it comes down to the core of Gaia, which is trust. And that means we need to be able to verify what we deem trust and what is trustworthy. So that is one type of component. And the second type of component is a component that ensures the interoperability of a federated system. Don't forget, we give you a piece of open source code and a very light contract, and then any provider can become a clearinghouse. They get through a testing procedure, they get accredited, and then you grow an ecosystem. And it's easily reachable. It will have a market effect on balancing out. It can be regional, it can be per industry, it can include data models and business models for providers and users. But there is a minimum control we need to have to enforce trust and sovereignty. Now, having said that, let's go to another picture that Ulrich already had in the morning, and then it's a result of some work we did since this summer between BDVA, Fireware, Gaia, and IDSA. And I got a lot this question in the last year. We cannot start because we don't know exactly on which horse we should bet. So that's a fundamental misunderstanding, guys. These are 4 horses. They are not racing. They're pulling the same carriage. And we have different areas where we focus on. And on the very low end are the de facto standards. But what is really important here is we are decoupling the business model from what I loosely call the data space stack. And when you look at projects we have today, most of those projects build everything from scratch. The whole data space, the infrastructure, all the capabilities you need to run a data space. But that is not sustainable because it takes too long and it's too expensive. And when you listen to Oliver Ganser, everyone is really happy that we had Catena live, but it was quite a lengthy process to get there. And with the technology and the standards those 4 groups provide together, you can actually decouple the business and the business case and the objectives from the stack. A light example for this is Booking.com, although that's not a Gaia example, but Booking doesn't have hotel, they don't have planes, they don't have trains, they don't even have the booking systems. They just bring together the booking systems with the user. And that can be done in a really exponential way when it comes down to data spaces. In order to create a data space and have interoperability, you have roles, which are user, provider, and the de facto standard creators, but you have also functions. So you need to agree on a policy. You need to assess and align the policy, because there is no point in exchanging data or are able to have technical interoperability if you say, well, I don't want to work with these guys. So you need to agree on the policies first. Then you need to agree on procedures and rules. Then you need to agree on semantics, because otherwise you will never be able to have comparable credentials and comparable rules and find together in an unorchestrated way, if you want. You can always sit together and make a contract, one contract, then you can make another contract, and then you can make the 3rd contract. But this is clumsy, and the data space business will be so fast that we need to make sure we have means of really accelerating that process. And the last one is the technical one, and the technical one, which I learned from Pierre, is more the real data exchange layer. Now, there is also the Data Space Support Center, and they have created building blocks, both organizational or governance type building blocks and technical building blocks, and those building blocks represent more or less those components that you need as stack capabilities in order to have data spaces interoperable. And why do you need data spaces interoperable? Let's take, for example, Catena. When you have Catena X and you start out with a clear business case between OEMs and tier 1, 2, whatever suppliers, it is still in a certain network. Now the European Union says we want to have more electric vehicles. So at some point, you need to think about utility, you need to think about energy, And once you're at that point, you need to think the next step, which is smart cities. And if you're not building data spaces for unforeseen future participants, then I think you've already lost the digitalization game. So these building blocks, in a simplified version, because I like simple versions, means you have one data space, which could be our Mont Blanc Dufour scenario that we had on the first slide, but it could also be Catena-X. And then on the other hand, you have a new data space that you originally did not intend to connect to. That could be Aerospace X, that could be any sustainability or mobility data space. Those two, if those two are built according to the building blocks and the de facto standards that we are creating together as a DSBA with the DSSC, then you align the data space layer on top with policies, you align them with policies and procedures and rules, you align them semantically, and eventually you align them technically. And there is always the discussion about connectors, and yes, you can connect data spaces. Everybody thinks about big connectors, but when you think about Mont Blanc, for example, connecting to IoT devices, you probably don't have a real fat connector. You need to have something smart and lean. And so these are the different layers that enable connecting data spaces. And the consequence of that is that if you want to connect to data spaces, you can decide if two data sets or nodes are freely exchanging data, which is the first example. You can decide that you have selective rules of exchanging data, and you can decide not to exchange certain data. But that is up to you. The control is with you, and that control over your data and over your destiny, if you want, is always a fundamental part of sovereignty. But what you're not doing is you're not creating a new stack, because all the functionality is on both sides. You just need to agree on the governance. You need to have a business layer, and then you can start exchanging data if both data spaces were clever enough to stick to the rules, because then they are interoperable out of the box. And that secures your investment. It saves cost. It accelerates your go-to-market. It reduces transaction costs. And what it really does is it enables the pace of digital business, because you're not building stacks, you're not building infrastructure, you're not negotiating million-dollar projects, and you're not establishing a lot of things around it. You just have 10 ideas, you implement them, test them, and if 8 are crap and 2 work, you will still be profitable and you will still be make money, because this is a pure digital play. And with that, we are going to the next topic, which is about catalogs and catalog sharing. I told you in the intro, people will be surprised that there is not one catalog, but there is catalogs who are sharing, selectively sharing. So what you see is, again, our 2 data spaces, and they have service offerings, and they have a catalog. And data spaces can now decide which services to publish to other data spaces or to a common catalog. And you can do this entirely or selectively, and those 2 will join a virtual catalog if you want, or a federated catalog, and Pierre will show you more how that works.
Thanks a lot. I think that's the 4th, 5th time. So back to Bob and Alice. When we saw the building blocks, it was data space building blocks. And now we'd like to focus a bit more on the bottom part of the X, so the infrastructure. There is one sentence that I keep repeating since I joined Gaia-X: data doesn't flow on rainbow. And I still believe that data doesn't flow on rainbow. Don't flow on rainbow. So we need to have this infrastructure. We need to be able to have this capacity to connect services together. And that's what the catalogs are doing. So the clearinghouse, as I was saying, you don't have one instance of the clearinghouse. You have several clearinghouses that are synchronized with each other. So for a question that I got quite a lot for the last 3 years, yes, we use blockchain, some of the blockchain's technology, but the technology of the blockchain is not relevant without a good governance model. So that's what we were explaining before about the maturity of the clearinghouse, the software, who deploys the software, can I extend it, who aggregate the clearinghouse, and so on. So the way you interact with the clearinghouse, it's not by using directly the wizard I show you. That's one way. But you can use the clearinghouse by, in fact, integrating your own layer around that. So a wizard, that's the one I showed before, but a catalog. And not just one catalog, but a collection of catalogs. If you want to automate, for example, the declaration of your services from your PIMS, so Product Information Management System that you have already internally, you don't need to use the wizard. You just directly use the API. And again, an invitation to join the Tech Theater to show you how to do that. Which means that at the end, the clearinghouse, they are becoming transparent. You as a user, you want to have this trust that enables you to make more data value, to create these data value chains. So the clearinghouse is the tool that's the engine of your car, but you are not every morning opening your car to check if there is the engine or not. So you take care of where the car will drive you. That's exactly the same thing with the clearinghouse. And each party then can determine, so Alice, Bob, Dufour, with whom they want to share data. And I think that's also one important message. So just after that, we'll have the presentation of few catalogs. If someone claims to be Gaia-X compliant, we as Gaia-X, we can verify that there is a claim, but it's on you to ask them. Don't trust and verify. If someone is saying, I'm Gaia-X compliant, ask them for their credentials. Where is that in the catalog and so on. And with that, I'm very excited, in fact, to present this next part of those federated catalogs. We have here in this area 8 catalogs that are synchronized with each other. I think this is a great achievement. And as I said before, here today, I don't need to show you prototypes that the association have developed itself. We are going to show you what our members have built together. For the first catalog, I don't know, you?
I don't know.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So thank you very much for all the ecosystem that participated. And I would like to spend a few seconds, 20 seconds, 30 seconds, on each of them to invite you to go and talk to them. They are all here, represented here in the booth around you. And the first one is Pontus X. Pontus X is specialized or has a specific focus on Web3 technology. Next, we have CISPE Federation. CISPE Federation is a sole catalog federated with the rest. And they are using the Gaia-X compliance rules, and they have extended the Gaia-X compliance rules with their own label on top of it, which again demonstrate that you can extend the model. Next.
Yeah, the next one is Eupro-Gigant. It's actually a set of projects, and they're in the industry space, and they have I always say they have very tangible implementations of Gaia-X, because it's really about hardware, engineering, manufacturing, and it's also a very nice example how sharing data is creating intrinsic value. So the data is not coming from selling data, it's really part of the process. So that's a very interesting one. Can you talk about Prometheus?
I can. Prometheus X is also, we have Matthias there standing. Very nice initiatives in France around tourism and education. And they have also integrated so they have their own network of catalogs, and they are synchronizing their catalogs with the rest of the ecosystem through the clearinghouse that we introduced before. And if you want to know more about their initiatives, then scan the QR code, go to the booth. It's the same thing for all the slides.
Yeah, I think that is a very important message again. They are all here, so they are real, so we're not doing any demos or fakes or mock-ups. You can talk to the people that have implemented. Next one is Cooperance, and that is from the aeronautic and space area, and they are using the Pontus X catalog and clearinghouses for their community. And you know Asterix.
Asterix is a catalog which is on the continuity of the demonstration that was done last year, but this time using the real clearinghouse implementation and signing all the claims. One of the things that we haven't focused much today is that when you declare your services, you also sign them, cryptographically sign them, using a key which is legally binding you to your claims. That's how you build this trust mechanism.
Next one is Gaia-X for Future Mobility. That's a very large project. because it has a lot of sub-projects. I think DLR is in the lead. They have smart mobility, automotive. So they are really, let's say, at the edge of a lot of different mobility concepts and technologies. And they are also working together with the Pontus X community. So you can see it's a very integrated project. I think they're also very close with Catena-X because it is a complementary thing they're doing. At the moment, it is a more academic project, but it will be way more tangible, and I think they will have a lot to show at Hannover Messe next year. And then we have AG Data Hub. We already had them in the morning. AG Data Hub, I learned when I joined Gaia that farming industry is highly digitalized, which I did not know. This is one of our top lighthouse projects, and they have a catalog, but they are also connected to Orange as their digital clearing house, which is in the process of getting accredited, but technically I think they're already up to speed. And with that, I give it back to you.
This one, I borrowed this screenshot from the AG Data presentation, because this is not, again, us trying to promote our architecture. This is now a picture that was built by a member to explain how they synchronize with other catalogs. And I think this is a very strong signal that this is not anymore us that try to educate or promote. It's we can even reuse content and work done by our members. So they are there. Go and talk to them. They have a very nice architecture, and they are very, very advanced in what they do. The last slides in terms of presentation, this one is a bit different, and that will be a transition to the third part that we have. StructureX, as I mentioned, it's a federation of CSPs, and they have 2 POCs ongoing working. So they used one of the catalog. So now they are not directly catalog provider, but they are catalog users. And they use the catalog to found offering from different CSPs that can work together. So on this side, left part of the slides, you have one offering which is called based on Fleet and Rancher that enables you to move your container and workload cross CSPs. And you might ask me, what is the novelty there? Well, the novelty is that you contractualize with one of the provider, and then the provider, because they know your requirement, will be able to move your container from one CSP to another. And on the right side, another POC, which is using another technology, which is called LICO, that helps you to scale your clusters across different CSPs. So on the left side, 4 CSPs, on the right side, 5 CSPs, and bottom layer, again, because data don't flow on rainbows, you have IX. You have your network. So this slide is interesting because this is not anymore catalogs and trying to sell things, but already a user of a catalog that use the catalog to compose service offering together. So we are going to rest 30 seconds. We have a question for you. So we have a presentation now about the clearing house. It's a bit technical, but you see that it's going live and running. We had a presentation about the catalogs. We highlighted some of our members' contributions. And we have a question for you.
Let me add to this one. There is a special booth area here, which is for Gaia-X, but it's not to present what we have done and what wonderful things we have. This is an area where you can get the most out of your membership. So you can ask the team how to participate in working groups, how can you participate in the community, how can you participate in certain roles, how can you get your projects in, because we need contribution. We are showing you today that we have done a lot of stuff already and that it's available, but we need to get it to the next layer. And it's really important that as we are a membership organization that we have members contributing. And I always say, you can give us a solution, that's perfect. You can give us a requirement, that's good. But you can also give us a problem statement. That's also good because it helps us understand which issues we need to solve. And the best thing about it is you talk to other guys that have maybe the same problem. When we got the first open requirement tool that we had, people were submitting requirements. I think it was 160 or 180. Przemyk is sitting over there. I don't know exactly the number. But when we consolidated them, we figured out it's actually only 60. So that was good for us because we could combine them, but you need to understand the return. The return is if you're solving your problem on your own, we are solving the same problem 3 or 4 times. If you participate in our working groups, in our sprints, in our community, then we figure out which problems are most pressing, we have them together and we solve them together, which is really one of the key things that the association is supposed to do. So that's why we asked that question. And if you have other ideas, I don't know, do we still have the open question there?
The question opens.
Okay, then you can either submit it to the open question or talk to our team what other ideas and solutions you find that we can get this as effective as possible to accelerate.
Okay, and now we are going to the third and last part of the presentation, which is the upper part of the X. So remember, first part, that was the middle, the engine, the clearing house, then bottom part, the infrastructure, the catalogs. Upper part now, the data ecosystems. And when we talk about data, we had this very simple scenario. Bob, Alice, the farmer. Okay, it's nice, and maybe you can laugh a bit, but this is already very inspired by what our members are doing. You can replace Bob and Alice by real names and Dufo and storage by real names, but you will be faced with the same thing. And in fact, one of the building blocks that we have in Gaia-X, that's this policy negotiation. And I personally see policy negotiation everywhere. When I enter this building, I had to comply with my behavior on how to behave here. That's terms and conditions. The way that Montblanc and Dufo will work together, that's a contract. That's a legally binding agreement by definition. Buying a house in terms of notary, in front of a notary, that's a contract. Buying a soda can or candies at the airport in a vending machine, that's also a contract. Less elaborated, automated, but that's a contract. If you have an issue, you can look at the sticker on the side of the vending machine and complain. Access control, usage control, that's also a negotiation. Me, as Alice, as a research marketer, do I have the right to use the data for advertising? Yes, no. How do I enforce this usage? What is the purpose of the usage? So it can go from the very basic file system, read, write, execute, or process negotiation, for example, with consent. We have non-personal data also that we need to deal with. Again, you need to negotiate. Do I grant the right to use the data for anything else that was not granted before? Right delegation from a legal entity to an employer a team lead, one of the lead people in the team, developers to a machine, and machine to machine. Identity, this is not just legal person and natural person. You have your workloads. Because at the end, if you want to automate, you need to trust the workloads. And that's what we work on with Gaia-X, to help you to have this supervised, up to some extent automated, the procedure to establish this agreement, this negotiation, and being able to perform reasoning on the clauses of the contract. We have one example from the Asterix that you can ask them later a bit more there. They have developed a plugin so they can go back and forth between a machine-readable contract and a human-readable contract. And you can start to supervise negotiation using their plugins. And I will finish my presentation with, again, if you want to know more, technically speaking, go to the tech theater. One thing, I know that this is the only slide where I have code, but I would like you to read the sentence that you have at the top of it. Because this is a requirement that I've heard so many times. As a provider, I want my customer to be located in one specific area. How do I translate these human English sentences into language machine? Well, that's how we did it. And this is not based on Gaia-X specification. Gaia-X was just gluing together existing specification to work. So country subdivision code that you had previously declared in the first step in the wizard, remember, in Alicante or Brussels. And this is relevant for trust because those claims are signed, cryptographically signed with certificates that are providing legally relevant proof. That's our ontology. That's our Frinca lingua. Thank you, Alberto, for that one. This is the information model, how we describe things, the vocabulary and the grammar to express those rules. And we do the same thing with service description, data product description, consent, right delegation. This is the core of the policy negotiation. And I will be happy to have a deep dive on that in the tech theater.
Thank you. Yeah, again, I always like when Pierre comes back from the machine room to summarize some things. It sometimes looks very technical, but it's extremely practical because all these functionalities that we've seen earlier are in the clearinghouse, and other functionalities that we saw later will become either part of the clearinghouse or will be basically ready to go code. And that means you just need to use it. It's a tool. You just touch it and it executes, and then you can participate. Now, going back to a little bit of the problem that you have negotiations everywhere. I honestly proudly borrowed that slide from Boris Otto, just recolored it, because I like the idea of data spaces as a balancing instrument. When you see a couple of texts here, it's like community versus individual, innovation versus regulation, data sharing versus data protection, trust versus control. That's a very interesting one, because you can put a lot of control mechanism in something, but you still don't trust someone. Open system versus close, and so on. And when you think about what we're doing with compliance, we now have base conformity, which is 59 rules that you need to do a self-declaration to achieve base conformity. And then we have label 1, which is 3 more rules that are tied to European legislation. And then you have 2 more layers and labels, which is 2 and 3, obviously. But this is because left to right is not a binary switch. So you have those 4 basic switches through the labels, and the fine-tuning, if you look at these as sliders, the fine-tuning can be done by the policy negotiation. And that is something where you have basically a very simple engine. Well, it sounds simple now, but it took us 2 years. A very simple engine that can help you customize for each and every use case where you want this slider between those 2 different extremes. And I think this is an important work that the PRC did with defining the base conformity and defining the labels on one side, and now in the next step, going into fine-tuning for contract negotiations. Doesn't like me anymore.
I will do it.
Okay. Now let's talk a little bit about benefits. We were thinking about benefits for users as well as benefits for providers out of all of the things we are presenting. And thinking about it, we figured out it's actually a life cycle. So it's not a bam, 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 5 bullet points. We're saying we get started and get enabled by a clearinghouse. And we are introducing logos, new logos. One is powered by Gaia-X. So if you get started, you can use that logo. And you get a jump start, because you get interoperability, you get trust, you get data exchange policies, and you get, from the ISBL, a vertical and hub network. So Alessandra on my team, she is facilitating all the work that is done with the hubs and all the work that is done with the verticals to make sure we understand the projects, the problems, the opportunities as a European team. And then we go to the next one, is the question how you can secure your investment. So if you build your data space, as I said earlier, if you build it too small, then the question is, how long does it take to make it broader again? What does it mean to be interoperable with other data spaces, remember, in this presentation? And how can you reduce transaction costs? Because if we go in the data economy, transaction costs are a key driver. And so that is securing investment. The next one is you can accelerate your business model, because you will have virtual stacks, what we call data space as a service. They will evolve, because you have Pontus X, you have T-Systems who build, let's say, the operating organization and the engine room for Catena. but now they are taking the same know-how and the same technology, copying it, and say, you can buy that from us. So there is a business model behind, and you can tap into that business model. And then with that, you can easily go for new business with new partners, expand data spaces, expand your network. And eventually, it's important to be, once you have skin in the game, as I call it, it's important you'll be part of the governance. So working groups, sprints, eventually even board, and in any case, the general assemblies are really an important part of the whole governance. And we will see in the afternoon that governance is important because we have industry players that are in large projects like International Manufacturing X, but they at the same time sit on our board to make sure that the governance and the guidance of the association is in line with the industry. Still not working. Okay, and the same is true for providers. So providers start with the data space as a service, data space infrastructure, and they are onboarding new clients. But really, the thing is, they become a clearinghouse provider first. When you're a clearinghouse provider, you can start verifying services and compliance services. So you can take existing services, do your self-declaration, make them compliant so that people can buy them and plug them into their business models. As Pierre said, data spaces don't run on rainbows, so you need infrastructure components, and you need to have infrastructure which is compliant and certified. And then from there, you take it again to the new business models, and eventually you end up with data space as a service offerings, which is maybe the next generation of platform as a service that we're going to see. And then again, governance is an important part, because being part of the governance is essential when you run business under rules and the governance of Gaia-X as an industry community. And to close that business case presentation or business case view is, when you look at the projects we already have, so we have Catena-X and we had it in the morning, and Oliver already mentioned Aerospace X is on the horizon. They have similar needs from a business perspective. They have traceability of material sustainability, carbon footprint, and so on, but they also have industry-specific ones. And I had a discussion with Alain from Airbus, and they said we have the same subcontractors or the same suppliers, but one is for cars, and they're building 100,000 cars, and we have a tire manufacturer, or maybe the same tire manufacturer, but we're building 10 planes. And that shows you that joining forces helps a lot, and there's a lot of synergies between Catena and aerospace. And then you have the supplier of multiple data spaces. There is large companies, especially in Europe, that are having supplies and highly specialized products for many different industries. And imagine that those companies need to have different interfaces, different trust systems, different architecture. For each and every industry, they are a supplier to. So harmonizing this is really something that is accelerating the business and is creating a lot of value. And that is accompanied by different clearing houses that are helping being the core of the trust. So it's not adding up, it's really multiplying if you combine data spaces that are built properly. And I think
that's all. We have one last question. The Q&A.
Yeah.
So some of the, if you want to ask questions now, we have a bit of time. I don't know how much time we will take, but up to you, basically. We are between now and you and the lunch, I think.
Yep.
So more question you have, longer you have to wait before eating. The first one is not a question, so thank you very much for the feedback. Create more market traction. Then I don't know if I can either display them there. We take that as a feedback also for the create more visibility through tech social network, create more deep dives. What happened to the Gaia-X labeling? No mention of it today. Well, I think that you
I did mention the labels.
Just mention it. I don't know how to scroll on it, but I can read them on the phone. Create business matter or equivalent, how to create business cases around Gaia-X. So again, I think this is closer to the academy topic. We don't have, in fact, that many questions. Highlight working and available software like today. So I take that it was good for today. We will repeat that.
Are these the Q&A? Yeah, okay, not the polls, okay.
Recent. Yeah, we are just waiting for questions, but if no question, then we can...
There was a new one?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so there was a question about the roadmap. I can talk about the roadmap. The roadmap is, I thought it's pretty clear. We have Tagus today. It's up and running. It's our current release. It's what we call our release N. The next one we are working on is we have a document release, which is named 23.10 or 11, I think. And that is just a cleaning up. The next real release where we have specifications will be early Q1 next year, late Q1, early Q2 next year. That will be the next specification that we are working on, and that will have a code as an impact. And Pierre's team and the community will work on that code. That code is then called, that release is then called Loire. And I think we showed already what's in Loire today. So this is what you can expect for the next release. There is some technical improvements in the engine room. There is the CES service becoming mandatory. And that's basically the key changes, I think, to Loire. So again, relatively stable, because we need to give time and align with the release strategies of the projects. And we have about, so in MarketX we had around 130 projects in total, because we only talk about the 10 Lighthouse projects, but there were 130 projects in total in March. And I would guess it's roughly 200 plus now. And it will accelerate because we can see a fast adoption of clearinghouses. So with Aruba and T-Systems accredited, we have Telecom Italia, as I said, Orange, and Gaia-X Spain to be accredited soon. And then there is a list that are already working on it to get into the market. So you can see that it's really growing fast. And that makes it really easy to take existing projects and just plug it in, because, as I said at the beginning, the technical footprint is relatively lean. So it is, if you're willing to have a Gaia-X project, and you already have a project, you can make it easily Gaia-X compliant. Do you have more questions?
We receive few questions and comments also. Can we be more consumer focused instead of technology? Well, that's the CTO speaking, so that I will have a bias towards technology. What is required to guarantee interoperability between different data spaces from different countries? I think this is an extremely good question. So the interoperability, and that was on one of the slides that Roland presented, the interoperability starts first with you need to align on one common objective. You might have the same technology, the same software binary running left and right. If you don't share at least one objective, you will not be interoperable. So the starting point or the story starts this way. First, you align on one common objective. This objective is being translated into policies, is how you take your decision, how you do things. Then those policies are then translated into procedures and rules. How you execute and automate, supervise those procedures and rules, that's where the semantics comes in, and that's what the slides with the ontology, the Franca lingua. And then at the very end, very last step, you have your technology layer. Because if you don't go this way, you might align on the technology saying that, hey, we are going to use the same software, but first of all, depending on how you deploy your software, with which configuration file on which network, it might not be technically interoperable. And then you might realize, okay, I can transfer bits from here to there, but we don't align on how to use those data, so we are not going to work together. So there is a logical order by which you need to address that.
I got a super nice question, which is one of my most important topics. What's the roadmap for Gaia-X internationalization to connect with US, China, Japan for supply chain? I would not limit it to supply chain, but we recognize that all our value chains, almost all our value chains, are global. When you think about digital value chains and the highly specialization of the industry that had happened over the last 20 years, you're not working in supplier and OEM relationships widely. You have business partners. And those business partners need to work together. And those are very global. And that means we need to be able to have a framework where everyone can participate. And we already started that because with the labels, coming back to the labels, and the separation between base compliance and label 1, we have already created the first step where you can actually implement that. So you have base compliance that can be done anywhere. In theory, and that's something we can work on, you can have a label 1 that is recognizing different legislation. Label 2 is already specified because it's increasing the value of your self-description by external notarization. And so we have the framework. I think it's fair to say that by Q1 next year, we can do it up to level 1, also enforce it. And then I invite you this afternoon are 2 sessions that I think are really important. Number 1, and many thanks to Thomas, wherever he sits, Thomas Hahn. We managed to get an really international panel on how we work together with international global value chains, and especially manufacturing X. And I think it's the first panel after lunch, but that doesn't matter because it's really strong. We will have Katrin for Airbus. We will have Ulrich as our CEO to see how we can support those. We will have Schneider Electric on board. We will have Thomas for Siemens. We will have Laurent from Gaia-X. And we have Doug from the US and Nakashima-san from Japan joining us in discussing how global value chains can use Gaia-X as a trust framework, and hopefully will start using it very soon. And then there is a second session that I think it's the last one for today, where we discuss with European providers and hyperscalers how a joint ecosystem can work on the Gaia compliance, because the main story is that you can stay on your stack because the technology that we implement is lean and complementary. It's non-exclusive. Was there anything else coming in?
I saw something about, can Gaia-X help me to monetize or sell or value out of my data? Indirectly, yes. So it's not Gaia-X. You are not going to give your data to Gaia-X, but you are going to give or to share your data through one of the member catalogs that are connected to the network of Gaia-X catalogs. So that's through that channel that you might monetize your data more. The last one that we see at the bottom part is technical, so we'll be very happy to take it in the tech theater later. We had one about internationalization again. We had one about XFCS, so the cross-federation service component, which, so the question was, is that a different implementation of the clearinghouse? No. It's another set of components that are helping you to create your federation.
I have one, which is, could you explain how Gaia-X improves sustainability? Well, there is actually a couple of projects that tie into sustainability from a contact perspective, but that's not really what we would drive. But when you think about my slides where I said you are creating virtual stacks if you stick to the architecture, if you do this, you are building less unnecessary infrastructure because you're not building stack components that you don't need. You only build components and tap into components that is actually creating value to your business case, and that automatically has an impact, for example, of carbon dioxide footprints.
There was one about internationalization. You've mentioned the hubs also that we have.
Yeah, we have. We can talk about the hubs for a moment, and then I think we
need to close.
We can close, but the hubs we have, I think 15 hubs in Europe. At the moment, we have 3 hubs in the United States, and they're becoming more and more active. We have 1 hub that is starting to work in Africa. That is for a couple of countries in Africa. We have 1 hub in Japan, and we have a hub in South Korea. And I think especially Japan and US will become more and more active and more important in the light of international manufacturing X in the near future. And I think with that,
Yes, we can
close this. And for all the technical questions, please join Pierre in the Tech Theater. For all project-related questions, catalog questions, provider questions, clearinghouses, you have Aruba, Arsys, T-Systems, they're all here. And they are more than happy to talk to you and show what they've done.
Thank you.
So hello, everybody. I think it's now time for a break. We thought that you were going to last a bit longer, until 1. You were fast. We are right on time. So now the first thing that you need to know is that we are going to have lunch at the end of the venue. And also, you can continue with tours to be registered here, and then they take you through the 3 tours that we explained before. Keep on engaging, keep on mingling, and enjoy the food. And see you at, I believe, 2:30 back in the stage. Thank you.